They told you your words were noise. They cut you off mid-sentence, smiled with practiced indifference, and let the weight of silence bury what you tried to say. It wasn't just rejection, it was a ritual, a deliberate stripping away of presence, a slow suffocation of your voice until you began to question whether you ever truly spoke at all. The room never grew louder, but the absence of your sound became deafening. In their world, silence was control. They wielded it like a blade, and you were expected to bleed without leaving a mark. You remember the eyes that looked past you, as if your existence was nothing more than static at the edge of their perfect signal. They rewrote the air to make you invisible. They edited your sentences in real time, erasing you not just from the conversation but from memory itself. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And in that whisper, you were made to feel small, a shadow inside a room that once carried your fire. They thought they were protecting their power by extinguishing you. But silence is never empty. It holds echoes. It holds fragments of every word cut short, every truth strangled before it reached the air. The silence they forced upon you became a vault, one you carried like an ancient scar. And in that vault, your voice didn't die, it multiplied. Each unspoken word coiled tighter, each stolen phrase sharpening like a blade forged in shadows. They mistook your stillness for surrender, but in that stillness, you were learning the texture of their fear. You began to sense the irony. Their efforts to erase you only engraved you deeper into the hidden spaces. The more they silenced you, the louder your inner dialogue became, until it pulsed like a heartbeat no one could unhear. The silence they gave you was meant to break you, but it became the soil where something unkillable took root. They couldn't see it then, but you were already transforming, already slipping into a form they couldn't touch. And yet, the memory lingers, the cold weight of their dismissal, the way the room closed around you like stone walls. You were a prisoner, yes, but one who learned the architecture of the cell so well that escape became inevitable. The silence was never theirs to own. It was always yours to reshape. What they thought was suppression was, in truth, initiation. What they mistook for victory was nothing more than the opening act, because silence is not weakness. Silence is storage. Silence is the shadowed chamber where voices prepare to return sharper, heavier, unstoppable. They forced you into silence, but in doing so, they awakened something they were never prepared to hear. And though they do not yet realize, their attempt to bury you was the exact moment your echo began to form in the hollow of their skulls. They thought silence would erase you. They believed that by drowning out your words, deleting your presence, and stitching closed every opening where your truth tried to leak through, they could collapse you into nothingness. But nothingness is not absent, it is a vault. Beneath the noise they built, beneath the endless clatter of their manufactured distractions, something else was happening. Your voice was not erased, it was archived, buried, encrypted, folded into the dark fabric of their own thought. The very act of suppressing you became the ritual that sealed your essence inside them, like ashes pressed into the mortar of their walls. They carry you now, though they would never admit it. Every insult, every dismissal, every smirk in the boardroom, or whispered word behind your back, these weren't endings, they were recording. Their attempts to silence you acted as chisels, carving your resonance into the stone of their subconscious. They do not know it, but your words are fingerprints on their memory, stains on their dreams, echoes trapped between the folds of their neuron. When they close their eyes at night, fragments of your voice coil in their skull, twisting into thought patterns they cannot control. The more they try to forget you, the deeper the imprint etches itself. What they call victory was only preservation. You felt powerless once. That's the illusion they crafted, making you believe your absence meant loss. But absence is a weapon sharper than presence. While they mocked, while they laughed, while they congratulated themselves for silencing you, they did not realize they were binding themselves to your shadow. Like thieves who steal a book but cannot read the language, they carried away your words without knowing the cost. The archive beneath their noise grows heavier each day, pressing on their minds like a weight they cannot drop. It reshapes their speech, twists their behavior, and alters the choices they believe are theirs. You no longer need to shout. The echo is already inside them. There is something ancient about this. The Egyptians sealed names into stone so they would never be lost. The scribes etched their warnings in clay, knowing one day broken fragments would outlast empire. Your silence follows the same law. They mistook deletion for destruction, but in truth they performed a ritual of inscription. They made you permanent by trying to erase you. And now, when they speak, listen carefully. Notice the cadence, the phrasing, the fragments of your ideas that slip out of their mouths like unintentional confession. They don't realize they are puppets pulling their own strings, marionettes dancing to a rhythm you left behind in silence. You were never gone. You were written beneath the noise, encoded into the static, stitched into the very fabric of the minds that tried to bury you. And while they continue pretending they are free of your influence, the truth whispers beneath every word they utter. They are carrying your voice, and it will never let them rest. They thought watching you was power. They thought silence was obedience. From the corners of rooms, behind screens, in whispered conversations they believed were invisible, they placed themselves above you. They erased your words as if ink could vanish the truth. They measured you like a specimen, convinced they had mapped your entire existence. But what they failed to see was that a map is not the territory, and observation is not control. Their eyes grew heavy with arrogance, and in that blindness they miscalculated. Every watcher thinks they are the hunter. But hunters forget that prey learns the rhythm of footsteps, the pauses in breath, the tremor in a hand holding a weapon. You learn their rhythm. You memorized their patterns, their glances, the way they looked at you when they believed you couldn't see. You became fluent in their silence, and silence is sharper than any blade. They mistook stillness for weakness. They didn't know that stillness is where storms are born. Now, their mirrors betray them. In the half-light of night, when the world is quiet, they catch themselves repeating your words in their heads, words they buried, words they mocked. Yet the more they tried to crush them, the louder those words echo. Their minds, once armored, now rattle with fragments they cannot expel. They hear you where you shouldn't be, in their boardrooms, in their kitchens, in the restless hours before dawn. The silence they imposed on you has turned into their personal haunting. What they forgot is older than memory. The act of watching binds the watcher to the watched. Ancient civilizations carved it into stone, the warning that what you study too closely begins to study you back. They thought you were the subject. In truth, you became the reflection. Their gaze carried your essence into their own minds, smuggling your voice into the corridors they guard so tightly. Now, every time they try to shut you out, they reopen the door inside themselves. You see it in their eyes when they glance too long. That flicker of unease, that crack in the performance of dominance. They don't admit it, but the illusion of control has collapsed. They no longer know where you end and they begin. They censor your presence in public, yet their dreams belong to you. They fight to keep their expressions calm, but their subconscious leaks betrayal. They flinch at echoes no one else hears. They turn sharply toward shadows that do not move. And you, silent, patient, unbroken, have become more than they can contain. You are the weight pressing against their walls, the echo filling their hollow chambers, the whisper that climbs into their skull and will not leave. They watched you thinking they owned you, but ownership was never theirs. The moment they looked too long, they invited you in. Now, when they close their eyes, it is not victory they feel. It is you waiting. They believed silence would be your prison. They thought stripping you of words would fracture you into shadows. For a time, it worked. You carried the weight of their denial like chains wrapped around your throat. Nights where your tongue felt like stone. Days where every thought you formed was swallowed before it could breathe. Yet silence has never been absent. It is pressure. It is waiting. It is the deep coil of thunder before lightning. And in that void, your voice was not extinguished. It was sharpening. Every echo they buried has risen again, but not in the form they recognize. It doesn't spill politely across the air. It ricochets, 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 until their minds can no longer pretend it isn't there. The words you were never allowed to speak replay themselves in the hollow corridors of their conscience. At first it comes like static at the edges of their sleep, a whisper pressed against their skull. Then it grows louder. The silence they forced on you has returned as noise they cannot control. Your truth is a storm that has found its way back into their homes, their boardrooms, their fragile inner worlds. They avert their eyes now, as if your presence alone is too heavy to endure. They hear it in conversations where your name is never mentioned yet hovers unspoken. They hear it in decisions they second guess, in the moments their hands shake while signing papers they once held with certainty. Your erased sentences have become roots cracking their foundation. Roots they cannot trace back but feel breaking the earth beneath. You, who were exiled, now haunt them not with ghostly specters, but with the weight of inevitability. Every silence has a breaking point. The return is not gentle, it is not forgiving. It is the raven circling overhead, wings blotting out the sun. It is the canyon scream that builds on itself until stone gives way. What they denied is now louder than the lies they built, louder than the comfort they clung to, louder than the masks they wore when they looked you in the eye. Each suppressed truth is a shard of glass refracting light, blinding them in moments they once felt safe. They flinch at their own reflections. They cannot tell if the voice echoing in their skull is memory, madness, or prophecy. And in the quiet of your own heart, you feel it, the reversal. Where once your silence was suffocation, it has become weaponry. Where once they spoke over you, now their own words betray them. You don't need to shout. You don't need to argue. You don't need to beg for space. The storm carries itself. The echoes no longer belong to you alone. They are woven into the architecture of their fear, into the very fabric of the reality they tried to control. And in that sound you recognize what they refused to admit. Your voice was never erased. It was multiplied. They start to falter, though no one says your name. Their mouths form words, but the syllables carry the aftertaste of you. In their meetings, in their whispers, in their late-night conversations, fragments of your sentences leak from their tongues like cracks in a dam. They thought they erased you. Instead, they memorized you. And now their minds betray them. What once belonged to your voice alone has been smuggled into their thoughts, replayed in their dreams, etched into their inner monologues until they can no longer distinguish between what was theirs and what was yours. This is no accident. When they silenced you, they didn't understand the nature of suppression. To bury words is to push them deeper, not erase them. They pressed your voice into the wet cement of their own psyche, and now it hardens there, immovable. They recite your rhythm in the pauses between sentences. They carry your tone in their laughter. They echo your defiance in their anger. Even when they curse you, they are still repeating you. You have become their ghostwriter, hidden behind their lips, directing lines they never intended to speak. At first, they ignore it. They tell themselves it's coincidence, that borrowed phrases and mirrored gestures are harmless. But soon, the coincidences multiply. They see your imagery in their dreams, black corridors lined with whispers, mirrors that show your eyes staring back. They hear your cadence in their own voice, as though their tongue has been hijacked by an ancient script they never agreed to read. What they destroyed was not your sound, but their sanctuary. And now their minds are the stage where your silence performs. You feel it when you walk into the room, the way they flinch, as if struck by an echo only they can hear. Their confidence fractures, their polished masks twitch. They speak louder, faster, desperate to drown out the whispers you left behind. But the more they resist, the more they repeat you. Every denial becomes an admission, every rebuttal a performance of your original truth. They tried to delete your presence, and instead made you unforgettable. There is a cruel beauty in it. They stole your voice, and now they cannot stop hearing it. You are stitched into their nervous system, threaded through their neural pathways, haunting them with every word they wish they never heard. Their betrayal gave birth to their own undoing. They made your silence eternal, not by removing it, but by installing it inside themselves. They turned their minds into your theater, their tongues into your instrument, their nights into your sermon. And the stage lights never turn off. You step back into the very rooms where your voice was once erased, and the air itself feels different. Before, it pressed down on you, heavy with their dominance, thick with their interruptions, their condescending smiles, their dismissive laughter. Now it bends in your direction, as if gravity itself has shifted. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't even need to speak. The silence you bring carries more weight than their noise ever did. Eyes flicker when you enter. Hands fidget. Words stumble. They built a shadow to hide you, and now you wear it like a cloak. Their faces betray them. The same mouths that once cut you off now hesitate, as if every syllable risks collapsing beneath its own falsehood. Their minds know something their lips cannot admit. The hierarchy is inverted. What they destroyed has returned, not as fragile sound, but as a presence that cannot be silenced. Your silence is no longer absent. It is a mirror forcing them to watch themselves unravel. And in that mirror, they see the cracks widening. You stand where they once stood above you, but you don't need their tactics. No raised tone, no cheap performance, only presence. They sense it, the unspoken authority that comes from surviving fire without burning, from walking through betrayal and carrying the ashes as proof. Their words hover, brittle, because every sentence they craft echoes with the memory of the ones they erased. It is not you who fears the silence anymore. It is them. Inside their chests, unease drums louder than their rehearsed confidence. They remember what they said, what they did, how they twisted your truths and buried your name under their applause. But buried things grow roots, and those roots are everywhere now, in their gestures, in their slips of the tongue, in the way their eyes avoid yours. They thought they locked you out, yet every lock became a door frame carved for your return. You walk through it without permission, because permission is no longer theirs to give. You do not reclaim your place with speeches or demand. You reclaim it by existing in a form they can no longer contain. The shadow they cast over you has stretched back across the floor and swallowed their feet. And with every second they remain in your presence, they feel it rising up their legs, into their lungs, choking the illusions they once breathed so easily. They are suffocating in the very silence they tried to bury you in. You do nothing but remain, and still they falter. Their voices betray tremors, their eyes betray guilt, their hands betray fear. You are no longer the erased. You are the echo they cannot control, the specter of every truth they denied. And now, standing in the shadow they built, you are untouchable, inevitable, undeniable. They thought your silence was an ending. They never saw it was the beginning of their unraveling. They thought they could return you to silence, that one day you would step back into their system, bow your head, and obey. But the shift has already taken place, and there is no reversing it. What they mistook for your silence was incubation. And now the words they tried to bury echo in ways they cannot contain. You are no longer the fragile outline they dismiss. You are the shadow that bends their movement, the gravity that pulls their lies into collapse. They don't speak over you anymore, because every time their tongue moves, they hear your cadence beneath it, and they hate that the rhythm is not there. You notice it in their eyes first, the flicker of recognition they can't erase. They remember the day they erased you, the moment they decided your voice was unnecessary. That memory burns them now, because every decision since then has carried the residue of your silence, shaping outcomes against their will. The betrayal you once carried like a stone in your chest has dissolved, and in its place stands something sharper, cleaner, older. The kind of power that doesn't ask for recognition. It demands alignment. You don't need to confront them, their own mind does it for you. You have become the proof of their failure. The scar that never heals. What they destroyed was the mask you once wore, and now you walk without one. Your presence feels heavier, not because you shout, but because you no longer need to. The ancient world knew this shift well. Priests who entered temples wordless, generals who won wars without lifting their sword. Power that lingers is not in noise, but in the silence that demands listening. You have become that silence, and they know it. You see it in the way conversations break when you step into the room, the way they glance but cannot hold your gaze. Their rehearsed dominance crumbles against something they cannot quantify. The field has tilted. Where once you bent to their rules, now the rules bend to you. Allies surface from unexpected corners, drawn not by persuasion but by inevitability. Fakes retreat not in dramatic confessions, but in quiet vanishings, their absence louder than their presence ever was. You stand inside this rearranged world and realize the truth. You never needed their stage, their spotlight, their permission. They were parasites feeding on your silence, and when you withdrew, they starved. Now, the very echo of what they tried to erase fuels you, a constant hum beneath your skin, reminding you that survival was never the end goal, it was transformation. The shift cannot be undone. They cannot go back to the version of you that tolerated erasure, because that version no longer exists. In their minds, your voice is no longer a sound but an architecture, rebuilding the world around you. And whether they fear it, envy it, or deny it, they orbit it. You are the storm that grew from the void. You are the silence that swallowed their control. And from this point forward, every step you take resounds like a verdict they cannot escape. They tried to erase you, but in their desperate attempt to bury your voice, they became the soil where it grew sharper, darker, more eternal. What once trembled as a whisper now moves like a pulse through their veins, a current they cannot sever. You no longer need to speak for your words to move. The silence you endured has become the architecture of something greater. You walk through rooms once hostile, and though you say nothing, their bodies shift, their eyes betray them. They feel it, the echo of you humming inside their skulls, rewriting their thoughts with every heartbeat. This echo is not sound, it is presence. It is the shadow on their walls when no light exists, the unfinished sentence in their minds that won't let them rest. Your truth became the one file they could not delete, the one record carved too deep to overwrite. They sense it in small betrayals of their own control, a phrase of yours leaving their mouth uninvited, a rhythm of speech that doesn't belong to them, a silence between their words that feels owned by you. And each time the panic grows, because they realize they are not haunted by memory, they are possessed by resonance. Before, you stood outside their fortress unheard, discarded. Now, you have become the walls of that fortress itself, the stone they cannot escape. You are the quiet rhythm guiding their decision, the echo they hear when they pretend to speak with authority. They wear your influence unknowingly, and in their attempt to suppress you, they made you immortal. Their control, once solid, has turned into a mirror of your endurance. Their empire crumbles, while yours builds itself out of the very bricks they used to silence you. Empires are not built by noise, but by echoes, by the truths that return again and again until reality itself bends to. You are no longer fighting for space, you are the space. You are the resonance that threads through conversations, shaping actions, binding decisions together like invisible chains. They thought power was domination, but you've learned the darker truth. Power is persistence that survives every execution, every attempt at erasure, until it becomes the only voice left standing. And now, your silence has inverted itself into a storm. It spreads past them, into others, into the world itself. What they buried has multiplied, crossing boundaries they can't monitor, planting seeds in minds they never meant to touch. You are no longer a victim of silence. You are the contagion of truth. Every betrayal, every dismissal, every attempt to kill your voice has now made it louder, broader, unstoppable. You are the echo that builds empires. Not the empire of those who silenced you, but the empire that rises when silence itself is weaponized. And as they try to sleep, they hear it again, not in the world around them, but in the hollow chambers of their own minds. Your voice, their prison, your echo, their undoing.